Mr. Satter, we'll begin with you, and we'll just go straight down the table. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Allen. 911 in Washington is dangerously broken, and it has been for a long time. People suffer every hour of the day because of dysfunction, confusion, and delay at the Office of Unified Communications. Sadly, no one in charge will even publicly acknowledge there's a 911 crisis, even after people die. That was the case when I testified here 5 years ago after the fire at the L'Enfant Plaza Metro where one person died, and OUC took 6 minutes to alert DC Fire and EMS. And that's the case now, and we're just months after a 4-minute delay at 708 Kennedy Street Northwest. 2 months ago, OUC's director sat in front of you under oath and made ridiculous excuses about the 4 minutes that were lost. To your credit, Chairman Allen, and the credit of Chairman Mendelson and Councilmember Silverman, you saw through that charade and expressed a great deal of skepticism, well-justified skepticism. Unlike every other agency connected to Kennedy Street, there was no independent investigation of OUC. Why is that? My view is the mayor and the deputy mayor don't want to pull back the curtain. They know it will expose something more disturbing than an inexcusable 4-minute delay while police officers are desperately trying to save the lives of 2 people. They fear an investigation would show that Kennedy Street is not an aberration, that it's a regular occurrence at OUC. And how do I know that? Well, for the last 3 months, I've uncovered more than a dozen incidents of OUC delays dispatching DC Fire and EMS. They range from 6 to 17 minutes. 3 of the delays involve sending firefighters to the wrong quadrant of the city. These mishandled calls show OUC workers don't have a clear understanding of dispatch protocols, basic fire department procedures, or the city's geography. And my work doesn't even scratch the surface. It comes from a very small sample of emergencies that I'm able to monitor via radio traffic that is time-stamped. I can't hear the 911 calls, so how many of those are being mishandled by the same staff? Of course, Mr. Chairman, you can't answer that question, and you likely can't get that answer until there's an outside independent investigation of OUC, and I urge you and the rest of the council to call for one. Here's something to think about. Not once has OUC or anyone in the DC government disputed the delays and mistakes that I've documented. The facts are there. The question now is, who in leadership is going to do something about it? Will somebody finally act and fix DC 911? Or are we going to keep hearing nonsensical excuses after people, your constituents, die because of incompetence at OUC? And please keep in mind, Mr. Chairman, that it isn't just the public that is potentially harmed here and is in jeopardy. In at least one of the incidents that I documented, and of course on Kennedy Street, it shows that even firefighters and police officers can't get prompt help when they call OUC. I fear for their safety too, and I believe you should also. Thank you, Chairman Allen.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hudson.
Good afternoon, Chairman Allen and members of the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety. I'm Dabney Hudson, President of the District of Columbia Firefighters Association, local number 36 of the AFL-CIO. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today on the state of the Office of Unified Communications. When emergencies occur in the District of Columbia, seconds count. With every passing second, fires continue to grow, gunshot wounds continue to bleed, and those that need help don't have the minutes it often takes for OUC to dispatch the first responders that are so desperately needed. These delays unnecessarily hamstring responding firefighters and EMTs and police officers, making emergency scenes more complex and difficult to mitigate. Recently, we've had several high-profile incidents that have drawn attention to issues at OUC, specifically a fire which occurred at 708 Kennedy Street Northwest, where police officers on scene requested the fire department via their portable radio, and it took more than 4 minutes for OUC to dispatch fire department units to assist. Unfortunately, 2 people died in this fire, and the answers given by the director of OUC as to why the delays occurred were completely unacceptable. Additionally, OUC continues to underperform and not meet national standards. This cannot continue. The residents of the District of Columbia, as well as the visitors to our great city, deserve better. First responders rely on the information relayed to them by OUC to make critical incident decisions based on information that oftentimes is incorrect, delayed, or inconsistent between agencies. Without timely and accurate information, my members cannot make informed decisions that are oftentimes have life or death consequences. Many times, the information relayed to responding units via radio contradicts information that appears on their mobile data terminals in the vehicles. It's not uncommon for communications to upgrade or downgrade calls without notifying responding units. Many times, additional resources are dispatched to assignments and placed on different channels, which ultimately leads to confusion when units arrive on scene. This cannot continue to happen. I want to be clear that I believe these are system and workflow issues that need to be corrected. I don't believe the hardworking men and women that staff the radios and phones at OUC intend to make mistakes, miss dispatch, or send incorrect information. I believe they are trapped within the confines of a work environment that is not sufficient to handle the number and types of calls for service they handle every day. A recent pilot program initiated by Chief Dean placed paramedics alongside call takers to assist with vetting calls for service. The program was very successful and affirmed our assumption that properly trained responders working with communications allows for more appropriate vetting and subsequent response packages to be dispatched to emergency calls processed by OUC. We would like to see more programs like this continue, as it allows us to better serve our community. Like our department, the members of OUC cannot do their jobs if they don't have the appropriate staffing, training, and resources necessary to do their jobs. It is imperative that the call takers and dispatcher have every resource available to ensure they perform their job consistently and effectively every day. I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Statter, I know that you've been critical of OUC, and as what I was going to ask you is, what are your thoughts around, like, I know that in any given thing that I do, I'm not going to execute it perfectly every single time. Of
course.
And nor do I expect anybody else to be able to do that. I view actually as strength when you can say, all right, that didn't quite go the way that I wanted, and here's some of the things that we're doing to make changes to that. So I was going to ask you a little bit about if I can try to turn a little bit of what I heard from you into a little bit more of constructive recommendations that you may have. What do you think should be done differently? Because I think that to me is honestly where I'm more interested in hearing is what would you recommend that you think it should be done differently?
I agree with you. And when I'm looking at our patterns, I'm not looking at individual ones. 3 that were sent to the wrong quadrant, the issues with Metro, whatever that is, between Metro and OUC that they just can't seem to dispatch right. So I'm looking at the bigger patterns rather than the individual incidents. And these patterns have gone on for a long time. So to turn it around, I agree with everybody that training. When I was here 5 years ago, I sat on a panel with union representatives, and they were not critical. They agreed with what I was saying pretty much, and they said, we all need better training. If the training is happening, it apparently isn't adequate at this point. I think needs to be better quality assurance. I think that there absolutely has to be better coordination with police and fire. What Mr. Hudson was talking about, and getting the cross-training between OUC and DC Fire and EMS, I heard that 5 years ago too. The problem is they're not moving forward. If you look on the history of why OUC was created, is because of news stories in the 90s that I did. And sadly, the reason I continue to bring these up is I don't think the progress has been made. And you're right about acknowledging the mistakes that have been made and learn from them. But what I heard in the testimony about Kennedy Street, nobody was acknowledging the mistakes and nobody was getting to the underlying reasons for those mistakes. I don't know what goes on inside OUC. I hear the outside. I'd like to know what goes on inside OUC. That's why I'm urging you to get an audit of it, of some kind of investigation, so we really get to the bottom of why these things continue to happen. I don't think it's the people that work there. They're wonderful people that work there. I answered 911 calls 40 years ago in Prince George's County. It's a thankless job. But somehow they're not getting the support to be able to do the job that they need to do and do it well.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's testimony today. I know we've got some other public witnesses as well before we move to the agency. So thank you all very much for your testimony.